Lunch!
A voice cried aloud. The interruption brought me back to my senses a little. The bars opened and I carefully stepped into the dim light of the walkway. Before I could stop myself, I had filed into line with the other prisoners, struggling to walk with the chain still around my legs. Looking at the other prisoners, I was surprised by the differences among us. Every prison I had seen, the inmates were always dressed the exact same. It wasn't normal, but nothing about this place felt normal. All of us were bound in chains, but they were binding different parts of each of us. I wanted to know why. And we were all dressed according to our own unique looks and personalities, but I still couldn't get over the chains. Some had more chains than others, some looked more painfully placed, but it seemed like each chain had been carefully and strategically placed. Yet most people seemed to just accept them, like they were normal, or even comfortable. In fact, most people acted like they weren't even in prison at all. A sign directly above us now read, "Mess Hall." As we entered, I realized it was more than ideally labeled, as we were shuffling through the buffet of sorts. The only difference between this and a typical buffet was that the mess hall workers were choosing our food for us. Foods were a lot of different varieties, but all of it was plain looking at best, and to my stomach's chagrin, none of it held any appeal whatsoever. And the stench didn't help. It both looked and smelled like they were feeding us garbage. I paid special attention to the man in front of me, to see what he got on his plate. I hoped I might get the same. He seemed to get the best look of the slop. Instead, my plate was burdened with a horrendous pile of gray-looking garbage. I asked the worker in front of me, "Can I have what he got, please?" The worker snapped back callously, "You'll get what you deserve." As I scooted away, the worker's comment repeated itself like a ticker tape in my mind. I felt an immediate tightening at my knees and fell onto the messy floor. My meal spilled everywhere. I looked down and saw the binding feeling was the result of yet another chain. Taking in all those who surrounded me, I realized the other prisoners were made up of all different ages, genders, and ethnic backgrounds. However, I was a little surprised that no one treated me like a newcomer. Most ignored me like a familiar face, like they'd seen me there for years. Very little interaction occurred between the inmates, plenty of yelling, and you could tell groups gathered in cliques, often according to their own chains and how they bound them. The chains were once again the common theme. Prisoners spoke to each other, mostly with harsh words, usually insulting or belittling one another. Most seemed jealous of what others had, but from my view, it seemed more about perspective, as it looked like they had different versions of the same thing. I found that weird. I arrived back to my cell and inspected every bit as much as I could, looking for some kind of clue. My cell seemed to be unique to others, and vice versa, but they did have two consistent building blocks, seemingly immovable bars that grew and shrunk depending on the moment, and those were surrounded by towering walls. They cast a long shadow and were covered in graffiti about my past. Another prisoner about my age shuffled by, right on the way to his cell. It struck me that I already knew him from back in middle school. Sadly, he was someone that most of us made fun of, and now he was in the same prison as me. His chains were layered one on top of the other, all across his body. Some looked years old, and then everything felt like it stopped. I looked at the chains around his knees, and they matched mine almost identically. I knew it was more than a coincidence. They were almost highlighted and felt too familiar. I sunk back for the first time and started to get it. Or at least, I thought I did. His chains were my chains, or maybe mine were his. Either way, after all these years, could he really be bound by what I had said and done? Was I bound by the same? I must have robbed him of so much life and freedom just from a few split-second judgments I cast his way. I slid to the ground and curled up deeper in my cell, so ashamed of myself and sure that everyone could see what I had done. Just then I felt a new tight squeeze around the crown of my head, like a piercing headache. But it was just another chain. This didn't feel like a bad dream anymore. There was something very real about where I was, and apparently, something very real about the words we utter.